the cultural viewpoint of the masculine primal is the masculine predator, which is part of the masculine primal. But when the predator aspect of it is operating from shadow, from ignorance, from a conquering place, like I must have this thing that I want at all costs, which is usually the thing that is, it's what's spoken of in the culture as something that's incredibly damaging, which it is, but it's all lumped together as this thing that is unworthy, unwanted, and must be destroyed, basically. Whereas there's much more nuance in it than that.
Welcome to the Magnetic Man podcast, where we help you be a man you can be proud of and also create win-win dynamics with the woman in your life. And I'm very excited for today's special guest. We have Amber Kelly joining us in the conversation today. She helps men in the space of sacred sexuality, helping them unlock parts of themselves that they might not be in touch with. And she also helps men in terms of unlocking their masculine energies. And what does that actually mean today? Because there's a lot of misconceptions around that. So I'm really excited to jump into some of those topics and a lot more with Amber today in our conversation. So Amber, welcome to the Magnetic Man podcast. Fantastic to have you here.
Thank you. I'm so excited. I've been looking forward to this.
Yes, fantastic. Myself as well. I've been reading your posts for a long time. For guys who don't know Amber, might be new to her work, go check her out. She has amazing stuff. I primarily read about it on Facebook. I don't know if you post somewhere else. But Amber, just to kind of kick off the journey, like I said, when I read your posts, I see this profound understanding. I also see that you have this love for men, which it's so refreshing to see. It's not like a lot of man bashing, but at the same time, you're not afraid to call men out on where they could be stepping up more. I'm just curious about your little personal journey, how you ended up in this place. Were you always like that? Did you used to be a bit bitter towards men and yourself? And yeah, maybe if you can just kick us off with a little bit of a backstory, and then we can get into more specifics.
Yes, I would love to. So the onus of my story is that I grew up in high demand religion. And in that religion, I was very, very obedient. I was very convicted, and I lived by the letter of the law, the spirit of the law. Like I was all the way in. And in the doing of that, or in the living of that conviction, I ended up unknowingly, subconsciously, kind of cutting myself off from my own body. This was when I was like an early teenager, and they start ramping up the talk of abstinence and sex being such a scary thing and so dangerous and all these different things. And so I did exactly what they told me to do, and I cut myself off from my body. I became a ruler over my body, which made a lot of sense in that culture. And then I got married when I was 20, and the sex was a disaster because I was completely cut off. I was completely ignorant about everything, like dangerously ignorant. And that set me on a path of really deep sexual trauma, like for a long time, probably a decade, 11 years or so. And at the end of that, I came to a point where I said, I have to do something. Like something has to change. I have to educate myself. I have to grow. Something has to happen. And so I started educating myself. I started learning about first I took it to the psychological place because that's all I really had access to. And then slowly over time, I started kind of working with my own somatic experience of life in general, which had remained cut off as I did when I was a teenager, until I could kind of start bringing my body back online. And then after about 4 years of doing that, like a lot of analysis and learning Western psychology and Western therapeutic methods, and coming to a point where I realized I was really, really shitty at relationship. And I had a lot of things that I had to learn and change about myself. I discovered Tantra. and neo tantra rather, and sacred sexuality and that kind of whole world. And it blew my whole world open because it fits so beautifully into this place of conviction that I had from religion that I had abandoned or emptied out when I left the church of my upbringing. And so I had this beautiful kind of spiritual life start to build itself in the place of that religious structure. And at the same time of discovering that, I discovered a methodology of really, really deep shadow work, like very confronting, 100% accountability kind of shadow work. So I was doing those two things in tandem, and that's been about 6 years of that journey. Um, and I realized after a time that I had outstripped my peers in how much I knew about relationship and communication and how to rebuild the sense of self, how to take deep accountability, how to orient from a place of centeredness rather than projecting my authority outward as the church taught me. And so I just started talking to people because I was so lit up about it. It was changing my life. And so I automatically had many conversations, and I realized I was able to help women, especially making their way out of high demand religion, guiding them back to their pleasure and their autonomy and their sovereignty and their accountability and all of these things that we kind of dissolve when we're in religion or in any kind of deep um, belief paradigm that requires our autonomy.
Mhm.
um, and after a time of helping women, I kind of got the nudge on the shoulder that I was going to work with men, which I didn't know of any women that worked with men. And so I ignored it. And as it does, those cosmic whispers become a cosmic scream. And it did after a while. And so I embraced working with men, and I had no idea what I was doing. And I am forever grateful for those initial first men that trusted me, because it changed my heart. Like, it changed the entire trajectory of my body, my life, because I realized that I was really good at it and I truly loved working with men. So that's
Sure.
it.
And yeah, fantastic. I appreciate you sharing it. There's so much
Nice.
richness in there, what you just shared. I'm curious to unpack a little bit about, you said like you grew up in a church environment. I did as
Mm,
well, a
okay.
religious upbringing. I think looking back now, there was a lot of like shame and guilt around sexuality that has been quite a journey to work through, and I'm sure there's still
Uh-huh.
more to go. But I'm curious
Yes.
almost a little bit from the woman's perspective, because you said like it sounded like you were like a good religious girl and you got married when you were 20. And that was the first
Uh-huh.
time I think I actually heard you use the word trauma or sexual trauma. And I think maybe the message out there, it's like, hey, you were a good girl and you met your good husband and you guys got married and you started to have sex. Like, that's how it's supposed to be. It wasn't
Uh-huh.
like you got assaulted or something by the sounds of it. So how where does the trauma come from? Is it not listening to your body? Because it sounds like you're being intimate with your husband. That doesn't sound that traumatic, but I think there's something deeper going on there. And maybe you experience it. And I even think you can't speak for all women, but I'm sure there's something similar that happened to many women. Maybe they cut off from their bodies. They don't listen to their arousal and they have sex because they should, even if it's
Yep.
with their husband. So maybe could you unpack that section a little bit?
Yeah. Yes. Oh, there's so much goodness, and there's a little bit more awareness around this than there was when I was initially going through it, what, 20 years ago.
Mhm.
But they've termed it, or they've coined it, consensual unwanted sex. So that's kind of the clinical terminology for it, because it is consensual. It's typically in a marital relationship and a spousal relationship, but because of multiple factors, it can be a complete ignorance of what arousal is or how it feels. It can be that deep sense of wrongness that we kind of pick up through that religious programming. It can be ignorance of the difference between male arousal and female arousal. And since male arousal can typically, especially in those years around 20 to 30, male arousal can be a lot more assertive. There's almost an automatic, like, kind of steamrolling of the female arousal, which is much more subtle and slow.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so it can be multi-factored of why it ends up being something that's traumatic, but not necessarily in the way that you think of like a crime.
Mm-hmm.
But what they're finding is they study this, and it's rampant in religious communities. This consensual unwanted sex, the outcome on the body is almost identical to PTSD. It's a shutting down of the nervous system. It's a going numb. Often there's lots of emotion that comes up. There's avoidance. There's a lack of ability for the women to feel arousal, even if their body may become aroused by or physiologically, it's not clocking in the brain and in the nervous system. So it's a very, very rich topic, and thankfully there's a lot more awareness around it now. But at that time there wasn't a whole lot.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting because obviously, again, in that context, when you're with your husband, I would imagine if I was a woman, it's like, oh, well, this is my husband. He wants to have sex. Like, I should have sex with him. And I'm sure that's a whole journey. Like you said, it's so multifaceted. But also, there was two things I was hearing you saying, which the one is like, before you were kind of living up from the neck up, like in the head, everything was
Yeah.
mental. So maybe you're
Yeah.
cut off from your body and your own arousal, and like part of your journey is coming back in touch with that. And then maybe an element of that is also like finding your voice and speaking your truth, like saying, hey, now not the time, versus just like, oh, well, I don't want to make him feel bad. So I'll just go along with it. Were those two
Yeah.
factors in the process?
Yes, very much. I think probably one of the most profound moments in that journey, that stage of the journey for me, was realizing that I had access to both a yes and a no, and that I was the only one that could really advocate for that, and that it was not only my um, gift, but it was my responsibility to advocate for that. And it was really difficult because my husband was certainly not a bad man, and it was almost like I wanted to want to have sex with him, but I didn't. And so there was this feeling of wanting to want it, and just this, like, inability to find my way to the wanting. And what I've learned since then, of course, is that our wanting, especially as women, is um, only ever behind our ability to say yes or say no. Like, it's
Mm,
only ever in our agency. And if we don't have agency, whether it's through coercion, or whether it's through force, or whether it's just through ignorance, that we just have no idea how to practice our agency, our arousal and our full body, like, yes to sex and pleasure, is going to be behind that. So we have to do the work around agency, which, when I worked with women, that was a big part of it, is bringing them back to that very basic: what is a yes in your body, and how do you know it's a yes, and what is a no in your body? And
yeah. Yeah, I guess it sounds quite simple when you spell it out like that, but I think most of the population, men and women, wouldn't be able to clearly answer that or have no clarity around that type of topic. Why do you think that is? Do we just live our lives in our heads? Are we disconnected from our bodies? What do you think that's
Mhm.
down to?
Mm. I mean, it's a grab bag. We can lose our agency through something like a religious paradigm where authority, meaning, or I'm sorry, autonomy, isn't really gifted to the individual, it's gifted to the collective. It can be a family of origin. So if your family of origin didn't support your yes and your no, and how you feel that and advocate for that. It can even be something really kind of innocent and sweet as it occurs to me, which is I really want to please this person that I love. Like I want to please the person that I love. And so their yes becomes my yes, and their no becomes my no. And there's a sweetness in that and an innocence in that. However, it doesn't actually create something of two autonomous creatures coming together and really creating what can be created. There's a projecting out of that authority, which is something that comes up a lot in my work with men, because men or I'll do a caveat on that. Most of the men that I work with, because of the nature of the men that are attracted to the work that I do, they deeply desire to please the women that they love. And so that desire for acceptance and her reciprocity can kind of, if there's not like that strong spine and open heart kind of mix in there, it can be something of he's hypervigilant to her approval. So it can go from a really beautiful place of I'm generous and loving to my partner to I'm seeking her approval and I'm hypervigilant to her expression.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it can be lots of reasons.
Yeah.
Straight up ignorance, never learning how to even feel what a yes or a no is in your body.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, it seems like things that we were never taught in school that might actually be quite helpful in terms of navigating life on this planet. And then people have to seek out work like yours to like reconnect with this. I don't want to say basic because it's not basic, but it's like fundamental. It's so
Yeah, it's
important,
foundational.
yet, yeah, foundational. And it seems to like it's hidden in these corners and it's becoming a bit more front and center through people like you and the work that you do, but it's still very much on the fringe compared to the mainstream, if you want to say that. But yeah, I love what you're doing, bringing more awareness to this topic. And yeah, to me, when you work with a man and you help him unlock this, it creates a ripple effect. You know, it impacts the woman that he's with, it impacts all his relationships to some extent, and then it kind of creates this like positive out rippling in the world. So
Hmm.
yeah, that's
Yeah.
really cool. And I'm just curious if we kind of shift to men, which is what you work with at the moment. What was something initially that not shocked you but stood out to you from a man's perspective that maybe you weren't aware of as a woman? Maybe it's like you said, oh, I thought all
Mm,
men were just like confident in themselves, but I noticed that a lot of them
yeah.
are seeking approval. Actually, like what were some of the elements where you're like, oh wow, that was interesting to discover on your journey helping men in terms of what they're missing or
Okay.
the way there's breakdown in their system?
I love this question. Mm. I think one of the first things I noticed, because I had been through so many years um, of seeing the man that was in my life as an adversary in many ways, because he was really the only threat in my life, even though he wasn't a bad man. He was a really good husband and he was doing his best. My body registered him as a threat, and his arousal was a threat. And so after I did these many years of really excavating into my own shadow, and I spent like a solid 2 years taking as deep of accountability as I could for literally everything in my life. So it was a 2 year container that I kept myself in, kept putting my feet to the fire, kept um, placing everything, no matter what excuse or justification I could come up with it went into the fire of my own accountability. And that helped cleanse me of any remaining fear of men. And it helped reorient me to any interaction I had with men became, how do I show up in this moment? And I'm talking like dating, I'm talking the store clerk, I'm talking the mechanic that works on my car, I'm talking the guy I pass on my run in the morning. Like every single man that I came in contact with became gym equipment for me to discover the ways that I was creating poor relationships with men. So after I did that,
Sorry to jump in there because again, there's something that popped out to me. Could you give like an example? So you said like your body saw your husband as a threat, and you had to do shadow work to heal that part of yourself, or change or integrate, whatever you want to call it. Like, what would be an example? Oh, I don't trust men. Men can't be trusted. Maybe that was something that you had to work with. You take accountability, and then you're trusting the mechanic or whatever. Like, if you could give one like practical example of something that you had to work with during that time.
yeah. Um, I mean, probably the most profound shift was um, going from that place of a really nebulous yes and no to I had to build that integrity with myself and that trust in myself, because that was the only way I could then have clean interactions with men. Because I had to trust myself that if this interaction does go poorly from a purely objective standpoint, I know I can walk away. Like I trust myself to know when to walk away. And therefore, I can bring my whole self and I can be completely present with this interaction. So, I mean, anything. My relationship with men in my community shifted because I no longer looked to them to like prove to me that I was safe and worthy. I
Mm,
simply existed as safe and worthy. And then they got to come closer to me exactly how they would. And it completely changed their orientation to me. Like I knew that they would protect me and keep me safe and venerate me and support me. So of course they did. Like there wasn't any other option.
yes.
But
Yes.
yeah, going through that was such a profound shift because kind of the shadow side of that religious upbringing really is outsourcing authority for the good things like the approval and God's love and things like that. Also meant outsourcing the all of the negative as well. It meant that everything bad in me was someone else's fault because everything good in me is someone else's fault. So I had to really, really become almost a hunter of that belief in me so that I could pull those threads apart. So I wasn't operating from that place anymore.
Mm. And would you say that's just a woman thing, or is that something you help men with a lot? The whole finding the yes, the finding the no. Is that equally in both sexes? Do you see? How does it play out in men that as well?
Yeah, that's a good question. I would say I remember hearing an interview with somebody, and he said he surmises that men do 95% of what they do for women.
Mm-hmm.
And I would have to pretty much agree with that. I think if we were to simplify it down to a pendulum swinging, for the most part, good men do what women want them to do. And you can look at that from a place of like, over the decades, over the last 100 years or so, there was a lot of like the pendulum of the feminine swinging and the masculine swinging kind of just behind it, especially in the last 20 years where we have this influx of social media, and so we have almost this worldwide culture and collective and conversation happening. And we have kind of like this voracious appetite for all of these different relational theories. And women are like, we want men to do this. We want men to be this way. We want men to be this way. We want men to be this way. And men are like, okay, 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 okay. And then men are like, wait, all of these things are contradictory. And that's quite frustrating when we're trying to listen to what you want, but there's a lot of mixed messages. And what I find in my own self and any women I talk to, and even in the archetypal feminine, these different contradictory points are actually just they're different flavors of the feminine that are meant to be completely integrated as a whole. And so the feminine comes in many different faces. The issue comes up when we discover these different faces, we turn away from the last one. So we say, oh, that last one was wrong. Now we know what it is. Like, now we know where we're going. Now we know what we want. So that, like, don't listen to any of that stuff that we said before. It's like, no, that also exists. The feminine contains multitudes. And as much as we can embrace that, then we can like bring that magic and that medicine to the men, who it's almost an anecdote at this point that men love novelty. And women, as the feminine, have access to an immense amount of novelty in her own self. If
Mhm.
she does that work of like continually reintegrating and nourishing the parts she already has and that comes organically, and seeking all these other parts and flavors and threads so that she becomes her kind of multitudinous nature.
Yeah. Yeah, fantastic. And I'm curious a little bit about more like the work you do with men. What are some of the most powerful pieces you enjoy sharing with men? What do you think men are
Mm.
lacking out there? Because in my space, like I see a lot of men who want to go out there, they want to connect with women, whether single or in relationships, they want to be effective. But no offense,
Yeah.
there's a lot of failure out there, you know, whether guys are single in the dating space, like they can't seem to evoke a woman's arousal and attraction and her genuine desire where she wants to see them again, or even in relationships, there can be a lot of breakdown. And I know it's on both parts, but what do you see from the men's side? What are they missing? What are they needing at this time to come into their own power and then also to be effective with the feminine?
Mm. Okay. So, I kind of created the work that I do, and the work that I do is in-person work over a 3-day period within an 8-week container. But the 3-day immersion, it's one-on-one in person, and it's a very deep dive. And I created that, and it was in person on purpose, and it was 3 days on purpose, because I was going into these spaces that were seemingly on the leading edge of like these new relational paradigms, which was kind of the new age, like polarity and the masculine and feminine, and looking at neo tantra and sacred sexuality, and like bringing all these places together in retreat space. And I was going into these places and I was watching the women's work and I was watching the men's work and I was watching the work together. And where the women were really, really encouraged to go into like this full expression of the feminine, both the delicate, like fragility that the feminine, like delicate softness that the feminine can be in, and like the big collie rage that she can be in. And the women were encouraged, and there was practices built around that. And I noticed that the men were not so much. That there was some level of like the strong, big, aggressive masculine, but multiple times I noticed that as those practices were encouraged and the men started kind of feeling into their bigness in that group space, the facilitators would take it into a different direction and take the energy back down. And at the time, I was doing my own like primal reclamation work inside my own body. And I would feel my primal side starting to kind of like come up and get excited, and the hairs were standing up on the back of my neck. And then the facilitator would change direction, and I'd be like, oh, come on. And it was like this thing, and I could feel it. And I was like, oh, the men. And I was just sitting back and observing, but I was like, the men were right there. Like they were right there. You almost took them out of themselves. And so I looked around at that and I was like, something is missing here. And I've never been to a men's group, but I knew enough of men's group and I knew enough men's facilitators of men's work that they didn't go into the erotic. And so I was like, there, even in the erotic spaces, these neo-tantric spaces of sacred sexuality exploration, the men aren't encouraged to go into their fullness. And so I was like, okay, well, okay, you found a problem. What's the solution? And so I birthed the immersion. And so this primal masculine reclamation, this heart-led, like totally connected between the heart and the cock, primal reclamation is what I built the immersion around. I said, okay, if that's where I want to go, if that's what I want to gift the men who would come to see me, what do I see as the essential pieces that has to happen, the thresholds that have to be crossed in order to get to that place from a holistic center where it is heart centered, where it is heart connected. And then where do we go from there? And that's really what the immersion has become. And so, like, that was my gift to this work. And after 5 years of doing this with many, many men, that is the thing that they consistently tell me is the most um, life pivotal of the immersion, is that work of that primal reclamation. And it's
Mm.
so beautifully inclusive of, like, there's the inner child work that has to happen. There's the parts around the family of origin and the mother wound and the father wound. Like, all of that stuff has to be brought to the current moment in order for that primal reclamation to even make sense. And so that has become this really beautiful practice that I love, and that changes a man. Like, it changes the way he stands. It changes his face. Like, it changes the set of his shoulders. It changes how he walks, how he enters the room. Like, it changes everything about him. So that that's my favorite. That's the big stuff.
Yeah, fantastic. And it's also just to touch on the primal part for a second, because I think a lot of men, they haven't had access to that. They haven't been permission to that. And also sometimes maybe they only saw like shadow examples of that. So maybe their father was
Yep.
really primal, but not in a loving way, and it was
Yep.
kind of
Yeah.
scary. And then he's disowned that part of himself as well. So
Mhm.
yeah, what do you see men's blockages to accessing that primal part of themselves? Is that, like you said, it could be everything. A mother who maybe told them that women don't like that and you shouldn't show that part of yourself, or maybe a father who showed it in a not loving way.
Yeah.
Yeah, because that's, I see as a huge piece, men being able to integrate that primal part of themselves in a healthy way. Like, that seems to be a huge part of the puzzle.
Yes. Well, most of kind of the cultural viewpoint of the masculine primal is the masculine predator, which is part of the masculine primal, but when the predator aspect of it is operating from shadow, from ignorance, from a conquering place, like, I must have this thing that I want at all costs, which is usually the thing that is it's what's spoken of in the culture as something that's incredibly damaging, which it is. But it's all lumped together as this thing that is unworthy, unwanted, and must be destroyed, basically. Whereas there's much more nuance in it than that. Uh, if a man, I mean, a man can have a father, like you said, he can have a father that exercised that power in a way that was damaging to the mother. He can have a mother that raises him to fear that part of himself. I've had men that I've worked with who literally will, like, they'll change their physiology, like they'll kind of cave in their chest and hunch their shoulders. They'll even, like, I had a friend who his spine had problems because he would try to hide his size. And so these when mothers who fear men raise boys, they need them to not be the thing that they fear. And so they create a divorcing of the boy from the man. And so as this boy inevitably grows into a man, he has this internal fracture. And so everything manly becomes either suspicious or deeply exaggerated and without heart. And so there's this work, and we all have our parents gave us legacies that we want nothing to do with. Like, that's just how parents work. And so we have this invitation then at that point to say, okay, from here, is this a story? Is this a narrative? Is this a belief? Is this a posture? Is this a countenance that I want to maintain? If not, then I do the work consistently. I show up for myself to undo that. A big part of that work, often that I see in immersion space, is coming into a different orientation to the mother. There can be either, like, sometimes there can be a deep love and protectiveness over the mother, or there can be a contempt. And often the contempt is because there's still a part of him that exists underneath the hierarchy of her. And so we have to do some hierarchy work. And we have to release her from that position of superiority that she should no longer have because he's a grown man.
Yeah, exactly. I want to touch back also. I want to get back to the hierarchy piece because that's an interesting one. Um, One thing I wanted to ask is like, say a guy is watching this for the first time, he's never come across your work. How would he identify if this is an area where he is being small? How will this show up in his life or his relationships on like a day-to-day thing? Is it he can't speak his thing? He's afraid of what his wife's going to say if he speaks up? Is it a lack of intimacy in the bedroom? I'm sure that's part of it, but what are some ways you see these nice guy traits, if we want to call them that, show up in a day-to-day life where guys like, oh, I didn't, maybe I'm this, maybe I'm not. What would be playing out? Some examples in his life.
Hmm. Let me see if I can pull some examples of actual clients. It can look like um, uh, being overly generous, um, meaning there's like lots and lots and lots of giving and very little expectation of reciprocity. He's living very, very heart forward, so he's out of alignment with head and cock, so logic and fire, if you want. It can look like uh, continually having relationships. Well, let me add a caveat to that last one. Those types of men typically will find themselves in relational dances with women who take, like who will accept everything that they give and give very little in return. So that's kind of a pattern, a dance that can happen. It can look like lots of insecurity in advocating for oneself. It can look like a consistently choosing women who actually don't like men. um, it can look like a lack of ability to advocate for oneself in the bedroom, in intimacy, in pleasure. It can even look like a lack of ability to receive pleasure. It can look like an identity of, oh, I am the giver. I am the one giving pleasure, and I get my pleasure from giving pleasure, which is beautiful. But it can go into this place of, I don't even have access to receiving pleasure. Like, it can even look like, if we want to get somewhat graphic with it, I've had many men that I've worked with that have difficulty receiving oral sex, like oral pleasure, because there's this belief, there's this deep narrative in their body that women don't enjoy it. And that's simply not true. Like, I recently had I facilitated a cock worship workshop, and I had 30 women show up, voracious to learn how to better worship a cock. And so that belief has to die. Basically, it has to go away. It has to be brought into the current moment rather than the fear. Um, every man is so unique and so different that these patterns can display, or they can the clinical signs of the pattern can be so various. But when we start to kind of dig down and get into the excavation, into that foundational work, it's almost always the same.
Yeah. Yeah, the underlying issues underneath the surface level
Yeah.
symptoms seem to be the common suspects. And yeah, I think that was a really good point that you mentioned on the giving receiving balance, because I'm sure I've seen it become a part of a man's identity where he's like, he makes that I'm the giver and he forms an identity around that. Like, I'm the good guy, like, look how good I am. But then maybe woman, because he's not able to receive as well, women almost like lose a little bit of respect for him in some way, where they kind of see like, oh, this guy's just always giving, but I don't have to ever give anything back. And maybe he attracts women who
Mhm.
take advantage of that. And then he's wondering like, why do I end up with these women, or these women who don't care about me, or I don't feel appreciated, but I'm such a good giver. So like, uncoupling that identity from like, I'm the great giver and I'm such a good person, where actually no,
Mhm.
that might be a part of it, but there's also a part of you like, no, there's a part of you that's lost your voice to speak up about what you want. And in some cases it can turn into like a people pleasing type habit. People pleasers are great givers as well.
Mhm.
It doesn't
Yeah.
necessarily mean it's healthy.
Yeah. Yeah. I think I have a theory that, and I'm
Hmm.
still collecting kind of data through
Yeah.
of this, but as men's testosterone peaks in the late teens and kind of steadily falls over time, and as it comes into a place, let's say in their 40s or 50s, the cock becomes like one of the things that I teach men is cock is a barometer. Like, it is an extremely sensitive instrument. And so when it is misbehaving, especially in those ages around 40, 50, 60 for a man, it can be a shock for some men to all of a sudden have this kind of misbehaving thing that they want to work the way it always did. And there can be like a separating, like a, why is this thing not working? And what I guide men back to almost, and what works almost every time, is the cock is trying to say something, like it's trying to communicate to you. And it's an incredibly sensitive, wise barometer. And so, but you have to learn how to listen. And
Hmm.
you may not have had to listen for a long time or ever. But now it's time to kind of start communicating with the cock. And oftentimes it's an indicator of something being kind of wonky in the relationship.
Hmm.
Where, and one of those things can be that he's coming from a place of, I'm going to give to get, but I'm not going to advocate for myself. So I'm going to give and give and give and give and hope that I get. It's not going to be reciprocal. It's not going to be something that is clear and transparent. I'm not going to advocate for myself and my pleasure. I'm not going to introduce play or any of that kind of stuff. And of course, there's a lot of factors that go into this kind of dynamic. But one of the things that I see in my work is that there's like a deadening of it, because there's that fear of advocating. And when we can bring him back to that place of like full head heart cohesion, he starts to listen to the heart and listen to the cock and listen to the head, and really start to um, feel what he actually needs in relationship and needs from his woman. And going back to one of the questions that you asked me earlier, about what is the thing that, or what are some things that have been so startling to me in my work. And one of them is how deeply tender and exquisite men's hearts. And that has been something that moves me every single time. How loving, like deeply loving men are. But there's a fracture there sometimes, especially when it comes to intimacy and sex, because that language, the language of sex, the language of intimacy, the language of sensuality and touch, like that whole kind of world of existence, lies so close to men's hearts and can be so deeply damaging when it's not working, and like anxiety inducing when it's not working, and so deeply nourishing and nurturing when it is working. That there can be like, there's just this richness there that I had no idea existed.
Yeah, we got pretty big hearts, us men, but yeah,
And you
sometimes
guys love us. Like, you
yeah,
love us.
yeah. And even the guys that pretend to hate women, they pretend that they hate them because deep down they love them so much, and it hurts, you know.
So much.
So
So,
yeah,
so much.
yeah, that's a whole topic. You mentioned the word talking about like a man being able to speak his relationship needs to his woman. Would you say that's both in and out the bedroom? Is it just about speaking about intimacy, like what turns him on? Or is it just even the way that things might be handled around the household or other needs outside of the bedroom? Again, so I keep
Mhm.
asking for practical examples. I hope it's not
Yeah.
irritating. Like, what are some things that a man might be missing and not be afraid to speak up about for whatever reason?
Mm. I mean, it depends on the man,
Yes,
but
of course.
um, if I'm taking the type of man who works with me, which
Yeah.
obviously sex and intimacy is an important aspect of their lives if they're working with me, um, much can be forgiven when that is working. So when that aspect of life is uh, held, and held as the precious thing that it is, and fed and nurtured and seen to and protected from like the outside influences and things like that, um the other stuff matters less. um if I mean I can imagine, like, if it's a household thing, like, ugh, the house is a mess. Okay, honey, you fuck me so well, I would be happy to hire a housekeeper.
Hmm.
If that, like, I would love to support your energy in that way, because you as my woman meet me in this place that's so deeply important to me. Like, let's just do it. And so it can be this, when we approach it as something that can be playful like that, um, it can become a lot easier when oftentimes we can get really crunchy and contracted around this topic of sexuality, because it's so deeply personal and intimate. I mean, it's meant to be. But in my experience, and in the experience of the women and the wives that I know and that I love and that I connect with, her care for her man in that way goes
Yeah. It's almost like a type of nourishment that's hard to replace in any other way. I mean, she could be a wonderful mother. She could look after the household fantastically, which are all amazing qualities. But if that
yeah,
kind of sexual nourishment is missing, just Percy speaking from a man's perspective, it's like something big is missing. Those other things
yeah,
don't quite fill that hole, no matter how good you are at those other
mhm,
things. Yeah.
yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
there is absolutely a nurturing quality to sex. There should be a nurturing quality to sex. It doesn't always exist. It has to be fostered. But that, like, nourishing, nurturing energy within sex just feeds men so profoundly. And that's something that the only reason that I feel like I understand that and can say that with any level of authority is because I work so deeply with men and I hear it so consistently from them. And in this work with men, I've been gifted, on occasion, I've been gifted kind of the sight of how men approach it, both by them telling me and my own experience of feeling that. But it's really difficult for women often to understand just how important this aspect of a relationship is to men. I don't know why that is. And of course there are some relationships where that's flipped. And for women it's more important for her. But kind of generally it's almost a stereotype that women really don't fully understand how deeply important this aspect is. Um, and it is profoundly important. Like it's so deeply important. And there's almost a tenderness or a protectiveness that I feel about that. And I try and put it in my content as much as possible. Like, I know this doesn't make sense from a felt sense from the feminine system until she's more fully integrated. And then it makes a lot of fucking sense to her. But there's almost like, um, can you reach your conviction to just try on that this is an incredibly important thing for your man?
Yeah. Definitely. And saying as someone who just got married for the first time 6 months ago, it's almost like from a man's perspective, thank you. Say when you are single or something like that, maybe you're dating, and if you're not only relying, so to speak, on one person to kind of get those needs or desires met, but when you are in more of a committed relationship, whatever your agreements are, you can feel a bit like, okay, well, this is the exchange I've engaged in, but I can't go seeking it somewhere else. So if I'm not getting it from you, then like you say, it can have a tendency to go offline. And this is something I think I've heard Esther Perel talk a lot about, which I think I've heard you speak about her work and your content. And you've also mentioned the word, which I really like a couple times, is like playfulness, like engaging this conversation or this whole realm from an element of playfulness. Because again, speaking from a man's perspective, sometimes it can be serious, like, oh, we haven't had sex in this long, and it can be like a bit of a frustration, but that's not
Yeah.
really, again, it's not really attractive. It's not really sexy to approach it from there. It's kind of like you can be this needy guy who's like frustrated about not getting what he's want, and yet there can still be a need that needs to be communicated there and taken seriously. So yeah, I like how you mentioned that attitude of playfulness is the way to enter in and change this dynamic, not like in all seriousness, because there's something not really erotic or sexual about that. I don't know if you have anything to add on
Yeah.
that piece. Yeah.
Yes. Yes. I liken it, or kind of the metaphor that I use is it's being fed. So
Mm-hmm.
it's a way that we as humans are fed. And so when you are starving, food becomes really, really important. And it's pretty hard to get to a place of playfulness with food when you are malnourished. However, the erotic, as Esther Perel beautifully states, is a place of creativity and playfulness. And so to me, the way that I kind of zoom out and I'm like, okay, how do we fucking figure out this paradox, this seeming paradox that happens? Like there's malnourishment, and so there's a lot of seriousness and frustration, but the erotic is a place of playfulness and creativity. So how do we bring this together? And I think it's having a multi pronged approach. So I remember early on when I was in, long before I got into like the tantra and all that stuff. I remember hearing this quote that said, in like the pie chart of a relationship, if sex is working, it's a small part of the pie, let's say a reasonable part of the pie. If it's not working, it takes over the whole thing. Nothing else can top it if it's dysfunctional. And so there is an approach that it has to be taken seriously. And the way that I frame that is like, am I prioritizing it? If there's a problem, am I seeking its resolution? Am I teaching myself? If I as a woman, if I'm coming into like my 40s and 50s and I can sense that my body and my arousal, blah, blah, blah is changing, am I clocking that? Like, am I tracking that? And am I learning about myself in with the intention to maintain that connection to my body as it changes? Do I track myself through my cycle? Like, what is my arousal pattern through my cycle, and how do I take advantage of that? Like, how do I support myself in that? Am I reading books about human sexuality? Am I researching? Am I learning for myself? And am I learning as much as I can about the man in my life? What does he like? What is his pace? What is his frequency? Like, at what frequency is he the happiest and the most content? So there, to me, that's the seriousness. It's like, how am I prioritizing this aspect of my relationship? Because it is important. Once the kind of the scaffolding is built around that, that's where that playfulness gets to come in. Like, okay, am I buying lingerie? Like, what kind of lingerie do I like? What kind of lingerie does he like? Does he even like lingerie? Like, does it even clock for him that I'm wearing something, lacy and up my ass? Like, does that
Mm,
even make a difference for him or not? Does it make a difference for me?
mm,
Like, what does it do for my body if I'm wearing something feminine and beautiful? Am I care or am I caretaking, or am I taking care of my arousal in every moment of the day? How am I
mm.
eating? How am I looking at my body? How am I talking about my body in the mirror? Like, is the language that I use for myself one of a lover? Like, am I my own lover to where I'm speaking of my body as something worthy of and able to give pleasure and receive pleasure? Like, it's so beautifully like, the way that we have sex is the way that we do everything. So if we're checked out, or if we're like totally engaged and it's really rich and it's really robust, and we are tuned in with different aspects of orgasm and different types of orgasm, and we're talking to ourselves as women in a way that supports us being turned on by ourselves. Like, are we doing all that stuff so that we can show up as lovers? Are we fucking hiring the housekeeper so that it's not like a density on us? Are we advocating for ourselves? Like, all of these different things. So it's both a seriousness and it's a play.
Yeah, yeah. So I like your work so much because it is this certain depth required, even like you said, what is your own image of your body, whether it be a man or a woman, do you even love yourself? Or when you look at yourself naked in the mirror, are there all these judgments, too fat, too skinny, blah, blah, blah? Well, it's going to be hard to be confident and be erotic in the bedroom if you have all those judgments on yourself. And for me, when I first started working with men, like it was very surface level. Like I come from the background of the pickup artist industry, which is all head, It's like, okay, how do you go out there? You say this, then you say that, then you say that. And having worked with men for over 10 years in that type of space, what I came to realize, which you've mentioned multiple times in this conversation, is like the guy is trying to seduce from here and he's thinking about it and he's trying to micromanage everything. And I've seen guys who can say the perfect things that they get taught to say, and yet it has like zero impact on the woman. And then you get
Yeah.
other guys who are more in their body, knowingly or unknowingly, and they're just kind of like off the cuff, like saying stuff that's not like the right things, yet the woman's arousal and attraction is sparking up. So I know there's a little bit of a segue, but it just goes to reinforce the point that you've been touching on throughout, is like getting back in touch with that body, that sense of groundedness, containment, like those energetic pieces beneath the surface are huge factors of what's going on in a dynamic between a man and a woman, not just sometimes the surface level, although it's also practical when the rubber meets the road to have some tools that can be helpful. So I like how
Yeah.
you touch on the depth and the yeah, there's a deepness to the work. And I feel like you really focus on that, excavating that depth and those shadows.
There in in the gospel according to Amber. So
Yeah.
in my world, in my work, um, sex is not the only way, but it is one of the most powerful methods of connecting into the divine. And so to me, being raised in this religious paradigm, there was always this kind of conversation around our bodies being a gift from God. And that's there's a very specific definition or meaning of that within religious paradigm, which is like, take care of your body, don't ever do anything bad to it, don't desecrate it because it's a gift from God and you'll be in trouble. The way that I approach that now is like, oh my God, like it's a gift from God. And it's designed for pleasure. It's designed for the sensate touch. Like we're covered in nerve endings. We can taste. Like there's literally there's very little like evolutionary logic to having taste buds and having such a wide variety of like sensation in the mouth. The only conclusion that I can come to is that these bodies were gifted to us as an avenue and as a vehicle back to that place of God. And sex being such a powerful drive, and sex being there's so much potential in human sex. Like it hits our places of like emotional safety. It hits our places of physical safety. It hits our desires for belonging, for receptivity, for love, for tenderness, for compassion, for power, for fire, like for creativity, for playfulness. Like it hits all of these different factors. And to me, it's like if you aren't moving with sex from that frame of how much potential there is in it, then you're sitting on a gold mine. Like you might as well be reincarnated as a snail or something. Like these bodies have so much power in them, and we have this ability to connect with one another and this drive to connect with one another. And that to me, that's where that like the sacred part comes in. Like it is like it is what God gave us to return to the divine. And you can say God, you can say source, you can say whatever you want. You can say goddess, like I love it all. But it's all to that same place. And when we can tune into that frequency of sex becomes something that is not only physically satiating, it's spiritually satiating. It's like the way that we reorient to our creator. Like, why wouldn't we want? It's something
Yeah.
that's deeply, deeply missing in our culture in the West. Is that
Yeah.
connection to something much larger than ourselves?
Yeah, fantastic. I once, I can't remember where I read the quote, but it said something along the lines of sex is a spiritual technology. And I'd never really thought of it in that way, but I think, from what I understand, like we can see a kind of global awakening happening. Consciousness is moving. And one of the ways that shows up is the way in which we approach or relate to sex or how we engage with sex. Because like you said,
Mhm.
it's sacred in such a special way, and that doesn't always just mean more sex, because you mentioned the culture, and to kind of take it to the other end of the spectrum, like today I see a lot of people having more sex, but like as
Mhm.
Kim and Army would call it, she'd call it like junk food sex. It's like you're on Tinder, you're like swiping, there's a guy, there's a girl, let's meet up. You just kind of like
Yeah.
have this like body friction, and then you just kind of go your separate ways, and it's very yeah, it's not very nourishing. To me, it's very nourishing to maybe the ego. You're feeling bad about yourself. The person who you actually like didn't text you back. So then you like go sleep with someone and that gives you like that little boost in the
Yeah,
moment. And then
it
ultimately
does.
it's falling away. So yeah, it also seems like in the culture, people are having maybe a lot of sex and it's more free and women are more cool. It's you, girl, like you go do your thing, but it's still like lacking a little bit of that depth. And it's like, I don't want to say being misused, but it's not being used to its full potential. How do
Yeah.
you see that playing out at the moment?
Yeah. I mean, the image that comes to mind is you you travel to uh the most beautiful cathedral in the world and you just walk by the front door of it and you're like, wow, cool, neat, great. And you never like go inside to like really feel the richness of it. And I mean, take whatever holy site in the world, the Taj Mahal, Machu Picchu, like pick one. And it's basically like you peek at it and then you're like, looks great. But you never allow yourself to like really actually feel the true resonance and the true gravity of it because for many different reasons. But when we're seeking that kind of dopamine hit, and we're going to sex and we're using someone else's body because that's typically what we're doing is we just need a body to get off on. So we're using someone else's body to have this dopamine hit to kind of rescue us from something that we want to avoid. Like, not only does that create a kind of a karmic tangle between ourselves and the opposite sex, but it also hits us in that place of our own tenderness of, oh, well, if I can use someone else's body this way, then someone else can certainly use my body this way. And so I'm going to put up my walls around my heart. I'm not going to actually do the work of connecting my sex and my heart because then I would have to kind of face that I've been doing this really, really wrong. And so there's this again, there's like this invitation, and there will be, of course, a massive part of the population who has no interest in seeking this kind of work. And that's beautiful. Maybe in the next life, we'll see. But like the people who feel this call that there's something more here, and I don't even know what it is. It's almost like I have a scent in my nose that I've never smelled before. And I have this sensate feeling of something I've never experienced. And I don't even know where to turn, but it has to do with something around sexuality and its importance and my body and like its tenderness, its fragility. And it's like the full spectrum of who I know I can be. And I know that lies within my full expression of my sexuality. Like, perfect. Like, that's where we start. And then we just little by little, step by step, do it, do it.
Yeah. I love how that can almost be like you said, the doorway or the gateway. Like some guy might be listening, like, oh yeah, my sex life isn't great, and he'll come and work with someone like you, but what opens up and what he discovers and what he uncovers about himself, his place in the world, his body, it becomes so much wider than that. And just to kind of touch on a last topic I'd love to hear your thoughts on is in my perspective, I think relationships are in like overall in society, like not in a really good place. You know, women are kind of more masculine and kind of scary, and men have kind of shrunk. But I do see this like renaissance, this reclamation happening where people are hearing the call for whatever reason. Something is pinging, whether it be women, whether it be men. And through work like yours, like people are reconnecting and re-entering their relationship and creating something incredible, something beautiful, something like new and fresh, like a flower just blossoming for the first time on earth. And I think there's going to be a widespread blossoming. I think this is going to happen for more and more people who feel the call, and a kind of split where other people are going to think we're crazy and we're just a bunch of
Yeah.
nutcases. And that's
Yep.
okay too, you know. But how do you see I don't want to say the future of relationship, but what is your hope? What is your
Mhm.
potential for men and women coming back together and relating from a place of love and health and fuck and all of those beautiful energies where it's a win-win dynamic? Where do you see this going in the best case scenario?
Love and fun and fuck. I mean, in my corner of the world, um, the community that I'm in, the people that I surround myself, even like I have women reaching out to me at least once a week, most of the time more, really desiring to learn what I know. Like learn how to treat men, learn how to venerate them, learn how to uplift them, learn how to motivate and inspire them. Like there are so many women who want to know how to do this. And alongside alongside boys being raised by men and excuse me, fathers and mothers who had no idea what healthy masculinity is or was, the girls, the women have been raised the same. So we're in this place of like we're in that really uncomfortable spot of recognizing that there's a level of ignorance that is unsustainable and not really knowing exactly what we're supposed to do about it. So we're kind of in that place and there's discomfort there and there's meant to be discomfort there. It's the only thing that motivates us to do something different. But as I work with men and as I have my content get larger and larger, and as I have men like you who welcome me to increase my voice, I see also this renaissance that you speak of. This kind of looking around, saying what we're doing isn't working. So what do we need to know? And yes, there are loud voices out there that's saying like men don't matter. And there's loud voices saying that women don't matter and relationship doesn't matter and family doesn't matter and marriage doesn't matter and children don't matter. Like there are big voices saying that. But when I actually tune into what I'm seeing on the ground, once I turn the volume down on the voices that like to squawk really loud, what I'm seeing on the ground is that it matters very much. People are still forming relationships. People are still getting married. People are still having children. Like all of these things are still happening, but we are in this place of increasing our skill. And there's lots of different ways to do that and lots of really good ways to do that. I mean, Esther Perel and even Brene Brown, like all of this data and these beautiful voices that are coming in, like this is how to practice vulnerability. This is how to reach for connection. This is how to recognize a bid for connection. Like these are the ways that we do this. We have so much data on how to have these positive relationships. And it's just a matter of intaking it and actually practicing it and letting it change our relationship. And I think that's one of the things that I want to be maybe advocate the most for is when I work with men, I work with both single and partnered men. And when I work with partnered men, I often will work not as deeply, but I'll work with the woman too, so that I'm kind of preparing her and getting her perspective and helping her to also be there to help him integrate. And like, because the relationship is probably going to take a turn, like where there was dysfunction or where there was a lack of transparency or advocating, there's now going to be more transparent, more advocating for him. And so the skill of holding that change tenderly and with preciousness and allowing a relationship to change in good ways, that's a skill. Like it doesn't just happen. Things are the way they are because some level of us was comfortable with that. And so changing that is going to be uncomfortable. But exercising that skill and that joy in a relationship changing in good ways, like, yes, we need to do that too.
Yeah. Fantastic. I think also, like you said, Esther Perel, I've heard her mention she's been married for, I don't know, what is it, 25, 30 years or something, but she said there's been two or three relationships within that marriage. You know, it goes through evolutions and transformation. And I can imagine when you're done working with a guy in one of your powerful containers, he's not going to be going back into the same relationship that he entered into the container with you
Mm.
in. So yeah, let's say there is a guy out there, he's listened to this, he's been following your stuff for a while, and he is curious, like, cool, how
Yeah.
do I work a little bit more with Amber? What does that look like? How do I know if I'm ready, so to speak?
Yeah.
Yeah, what would you say to a guy in that position? Sorry, before
Mm.
you answer that, I don't mean to
Uh-huh.
cut you off from your sentence there, but I've just noticed that I'm curious multiple times throughout the podcast. Before you answer, you will just like pause and take a breath. What's going
Mm.
on there? Are you connecting with your body? I'm curious.
I like to speak as uh, as much as I can from my center, but there's also a desire to bring it to essence, like be as concise as I possibly can, and to answer the richness of the question with as much richness as I can find. Because when you ask me a question, I have lots of thoughts that come into my head, but um, taking a moment to honor what would be the most useful and the most um, like what is the biggest gift I can give in my answer. So I pause and feel for that.
Fantastic. Thanks for answering that.
Of
And
course.
yeah, going back to the point around a man, how to work with you, how does he know if he's ready, if he's feeling the call? Would love to know a bit more about that as well.
Yeah. So my work is very, very deep. Like we go very deep. We have the capacity to go very deep. I won't do a man the disservice of taking him somewhere he's not ready to go. And the work that I do is very high caliber. And so I also, as the hollow bone of it, or as the vessel of it, have to also make sure that the gift and the knowledge that I'm giving is going to be held in reverence in the way that it should be. So how does a man know that he's ready to work with me? He's done deep work. He has found his center and lost his center and found it again. He's gone through refiner's fires. And he's done a deep amount of work, especially with other men, like in men's groups. And yet he suspects, or he feels, that there's something in that divine erotic place, that holy eros, that he has yet to touch. Or maybe he's touched it just a little bit, or maybe he just senses that that's where he needs to go next. And that's when he would reach out to me. I have an application. I have a pretty intense vetting process because of the depth of the work. I have zero interest in wasting any men's time or money. So I have a pretty rigid vetting process. So I know that the man is working with me at a time that I will actually do the most that I can for him. Um, the vast majority of the men that reach out to me, I funnel to either men's work or therapy, because they're just not quite ready for the work that I do. It can be beautifully confronting. And I truly love it. I love working at these high levels, these high calibers. And it's not for everyone. So if a man has that desire, he would reach out to me and we would begin with the application.
Yeah,
And then we would we would start with that 8 weeks and plan that immersion, and off we go.
Cool. Yeah, I really appreciate you setting the boundaries, so to speak, even early on the container, who it's for and also who it's not for, and being very clear in that. And when you say reach out to you, we'll obviously put all your links and socials underneath this video. Is it on Facebook? Is it a website? What's the best way for them to get in touch with you?
Yeah, Facebook Messenger is the best. Yeah, that'll reach me the fastest. And I also, if they find me through Facebook, my application is pinned on the top of my page or whatever it is. So that's there too. But yeah, Facebook Messenger or Instagram, but Facebook is preferred.
Okay, fantastic. So if you guys are feeling the call, highly encourage you to reach out to Amber. You can see the depth of her mastery, of her passion for the subject. And yeah, the work she's doing with men cannot be understated. And if you're not ready for her level of work, maybe it's the first time listening to her, definitely go give her profile a follow on Facebook, because she drops these extremely rich and dense posts in terms of pointers and moving from confusion to clarity. I really enjoy
Right.
reading them, so I know you guys will too, and you can kind of
I know.
warm up to her world and what she has to share. So Amber, thank you so
Mhm.
much for joining us today on the Magnetic Man podcast. It's been truly a memorable
My
experience
pleasure.
and given me a lot as well. So yeah, thank you so much for joining us. And just any final thoughts or words before we wrap it up from your side?
Mm. This is truly, um, I truly believe that this type of work, for men and for women, but of course my heart lies in working this with the masculine, is the thing that's going to bring us to that pivot point. It's going to bring us to that release after this discomfort that the world is in right now. And it's it's what I would be doing regardless, because it's so enriching to me and I truly love it.
Fantastic. I don't think I have anything to add on to that. Like I said, guys, we'll put all the links below. Go check out Amber, check out her work. Amber, thanks so much for being here. And yeah, we'll chat
Um,
again soon.
Bye, Daniel.